Welcome to Gospel Tangents. I'm your host, Rick Bennett. Please consider donating or purchasing a transcript by going to our website, gospeltangents.com/shop. You'll help support other documentaries and podcasts such as this. In 1890, President Wilford Woodruff issued what's known as the Manifesto, Official Declaration 1 in the Doctrine and Covenants, prohibiting polygamy. What many Mormons don't know is that polygamy did not end in 1890. In fact, Wilford Woodruff himself may have married another wife in 1897, a year after statehood in Utah. We're going to talk in this episode about post-manifesto polygamy. What are some of the things that led to the second manifesto in 1904? Ann Wild, a polygamy expert, will tell us why. Check out the conversation. So let's move on to kind of, post-manifesto polygamy. There are some critics of the church, of the LDS Church, that say, the reason why Wilford Woodruff did that was he wanted a statehood and he wanted to get the government off their backs, but he was still secretly practicing polygamy. And it seems like there were some polygamist marriages. I know the judge, when that came out, said, he was going to take it for what it said, and it seemed like the LDS Church was stopping polygamy, at least publicly. It does seem like it did move underground. Do you have any comments on whether you think that 1890 manifesto was that meant for public consumption, but privately we were still going to practice that, or how does that work?
Well, I don't know what was in the back of Wilford Woodruff's mind. I don't know, other than the fact that he took, as far as we know, there's pretty good evidence that he took a plural wife 7 years after the manifesto himself. We also have very good evidence that many of the apostles, the Quorum of the 12, took additional wives after 1890. That's one reason why the 1904 manifesto had to come out, is to put teeth in it, because so many people were very quietly taking additional wives, especially in Canada and Mexico. And they were being sent down there by some leaders of the church with a coded message to whoever, like Anthony W. Ivins or whoever was in Mexico or Canada that was designated to perform plural marriages outside the United States. They had this note authorizing them that it was okay with the leaders that they perform this plural marriage to the couple that presented the note. So, yeah, very definitely there were many plural marriages after 1890. One of the best things that's ever been written on that period of time is Michael Quinn's Post-Manifesto Polygamy. It was in the 1985 Dialogue magazine, about 95 pages. It's absolutely amazing because he's so meticulous about footnotes. And so he had all this references and sources on all these people that took plural wives that were leaders of the church after 1890.
Do we have any idea how many leaders of the church did take plural wives between 1890 and 1904?
Well, leaders of the church, that could include stake presidents and bishops, but among the Quorum of the 12, I think it was about half took additional wives.
Okay.
But I have to research that to be sure.
So, would you say that Wilford Woodruff didn't really mean the manifesto if he was still taking plural wives?
He did it for the church. It was a press release, really. Mm-hmm. That's what it was. And when Orson Pratt announced it in the fall conference of 1890, it was something that when they issued the press release in late September, the government officials, U.S. government officials, wouldn't accept it because it hadn't been voted on by the church. So the next conference, which was early October, they presented it as something for the people to vote on. And I'll never forget the quote. B.H. Roberts was sitting on the stand, and when he called the vote, he said, "It was the awfulest day of my life. I could not raise my hand. I could not vote for it," for the manifesto.
Oh, really?
So, there are experiences like that different people had. Some of them were so happy they cheered. Others had tears in their eyes. A lot of them had questions. What do I do with my wives then? But it was a very tough time. So I'm not going to judge Wilford Woodruff or anybody. I just would like to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Okay.
That it was a test, really, for those who really wanted to live it. There was still a way to live it, but you couldn't do it with the consent of the church anymore.
Okay. Well, you could.
Well, you could, but after 1904, you couldn't.
Okay, so let's talk about 1904. What were the events going on in the church that led to the Second Manifesto?
Well, the very fact that a lot of the people had been taking additional wives. And Joseph F. Smith, himself had several wives. I think he just realized that the pressure was coming again from the government. You aren't meaning what you said. We understand there's still being marriages performed. He felt like something had to be done to reinstate or reinforce that decision of 1890. So he issued the Second Manifesto. And I believe that one said that it was not, it should be discontinued in Mexico and Canada as well as the United States. I'd have to double check on that, but I think that's when it was extended to include outside the United States.
So the 1890 manifesto was inside the United States only?
Well, it didn't say that, but that's the way it was interpreted.
Okay.
See, he was speaking for the church to the U.S. government. So the people understood it. Oh, well, then that applies only to the United States. He didn't say that in the manifesto, but they interpreted it as being that. So that's why they thought, well, we can still do it out of the country. We're not doing anything wrong.
So is it true that some people went to Mexico to obtain a plural sealing?
A plural
wife or a plural sealing?
Well, a lot of them took their prospective plural wife and went down to Mexico or Canada because there was somebody down there designated to perform plural marriages.
I've heard that Mitt Romney has some...
Miles Romney, I think it was a great-grandfather.
Okay.
Grandfather or great-grandfather. And so he's a descendant of Miles Romney, who lived in Mexico and had plural wives.
Okay, so Miles Romney, did he actually live in Mexico, or was okay?
As far as I understand.
So it wasn't that he just went down there to get married and came back, or?
I'm not sure. I think he was living down there, but sometimes people would go down there just to get away from the government, and they take their plural family with them. There's those kind of situations. Okay. So I'm not sure if he just was down there living because he had more than one wife and he wanted to live it peacefully. I think that's kind of the case. I read his biography, but it's been a while, so I can't remember for sure.
Okay. So that's interesting. So it seems to me that there was also another big issue in the early 1900s that may have led to the Second Manifesto, and that was the Reed-Smoot hearings.
Oh, right, in 1904.
Yeah, can you talk about that?
Well, what particularly? there's 4 big volumes about the Reed-Smoot hearings. So,
as I understand it,
they didn't want to seat him because he didn't have more than one wife.
Well, from what I understand, he had been elected a senator from Utah.
Right.
Was that in 1900? I don't remember.
1904.
What year it was. Oh, it was 1904.
Well, I think that's when the hearing was, 1904, yeah. And I'm not sure when he was elected. Shortly before that. Okay,
because it seems like it was a while. And as I recall, the history that I remember is that the Senate did not want to seat Senator Smoot and Apostle Smoot. Even though he was a monogamist,
right.
Because there was concern that the Mormons were still doing polygamous marriages in the temples against the 1890 Manifesto.
That's my understanding.
Okay, and so that's probably what led the government to apply a little bit more pressure.
It was one of the reasons, I'm sure.
And led Joseph F. Smith to issue the Second Manifesto.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so that's kind of what led to that. So now, even with the 1904 Manifesto, well, as I recall, wasn't there an apostle or two that was excommunicated for?
Yes, there were 2 of them, John W. Taylor and Matthias Cowley, and the term has been used. They were kind of scapegoats. The church felt like they had to do something to show the government they were serious about discontinuing it. So Matthias Cowley was disfellowshipped, and John W. Taylor was excommunicated. Matthias Cowley was eventually reinstated.
To the quorum or to the church?
Just to the church. I don't think he was put back in the
I don't
quorum.
think so either.
But anyway, both of them were polygamous, and I just feel like the other members of the quorum decided that something had to be done to show the government they were serious.
Okay, so they were more scapegoats. Now, as I understand it, you were actually a member of the LDS Church for a number of years.
Many years. I was born and raised in it.
Born and raised.
I was not I'm not going to say the date that I was excommunicated, but I was excommunicated because I had been a plural wife.
Okay. So, and I know I've heard another interview with you, and you said that many fundamentalist Mormons believe that the church is, even if it's in apostasy, it's still a good thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And that it does contain a lot of the important ordinances of the gospel. Is that true?
Well, they've been changed to some degree, but it's still got a lot of good things about it. I'm glad that I was raised in it. I went to BYU. I loved going to school there. I still love the church. It does a lot of good. I even go once in a while because I have friends there. And I just, this is the way the Lord wants it. It's been all the way through history. This is what's happened. The Lord restores the gospel. It lasts like in the time of the Nephites for 200 years nearly, and then the people start making changes and fall away. It's nothing that hasn't been done in the history before. So it doesn't really get me all riled up where I can't sleep at night because of the changes that have been made. I feel like this is the way it's supposed to be. This is a test for people who really want to continue with these eternal principles. Plural marriage is just one of them. And then when things are set in order, then the Lord will know which ones he can depend on to keep those principles alive. Okay.
So I believe, and I don't know, you tell me if I'm wrong here, that fundamentalists generally do like that LDS members go through the temple and they complete those ordinances. They recognize those ordinances and those priesthood. Is that true?
No.
Oh, that's not true.
Well, there's a lot of fundamentalists that question whether or not the church still has priesthood authority. And I don't know if we want to go into that, but for various reasons. So I don't think there are many fundamentalists that think that the temple work that's being done today is authentic or of any validity. And in fact, this isn't my my personal belief, but some of the fundamentalist groups have temples of their own where they do their own endowment work because they feel like they have the priesthood, and so it is of more efficacy than what the church is doing. I think that's why we have 1,000 years of the millennium, is to straighten all this out. So I'm not going to say that the temple work that's being done today is authentic or not. That's up to the Lord to decide on that. Temple work should be done with correct priesthood, and that's debatable.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Ann Wild. In our next conversation, we'll talk about the Apostolic United Brethren. You may or may not have heard of that group before, but you may have seen the TV show with Cody Brown of Sister Wives. Ann Wild will tell us more about their group.
Well, the AUB has a council, priesthood council. The number varies from time to time. They have a senior member of that priesthood council. He's called the president of the priesthood in that group. They do not have the strict appointment and control over marriages that FLDS does by any means. There's a lot more free agency.
Click here to subscribe, click here for a transcript, and over here you'll see some other videos that we've done here on YouTube. We hope you'll use this as a valuable resource to learn more about Mormon history.